Are you guilty of any of these 4 things that might be ruining the flow of your story? Today, I'm diving into narrative flow, so be sure to stick around to learn which mistakes I'm talking about. Let's get started! Hey guys, Nour here, and welcome back to my channel. For those visiting for the first time, hello! I'm the fantasy author of the novel Divinity Falling. Be sure to subscribe for weekly writing advice videos. So, we don't often talk about flow on this channel, at least not directly. But flow is super important. If you're wondering what flow is, it's basically how well your story moves from beginning to end. Essentially, does everything work together and flow? Or are there moments that throw readers off? Now, as writers, sometimes it's easy to miss some red flags in our stories because we're so close to the writing, which is why we might not realize that certain things are ruining the flow. So let's dive into the 4 things that might be ruining the flow of your story. Number 1, having a prologue. This might make some of you mad, but prologues generally don't work. Yes, some stories have pulled it off, and I know more stories will continue pulling it off. But most writers don't know what they're doing with prologues. And yes, they can ruin the flow of your story. You would not believe how many unpublished stories I've read where the prologue ruined the entire book for me. Some prologues were so dull that I felt like my time was wasted. They were full of pointless filler and information dumps and nothing that should take place at the forefront of the story. And then there were prologues that read fantastic, but the problem was that they were more fantastic than chapter 1. And I kept wondering why they weren't simply chapter 1. Since the prologue comes before anything else in your book, it sets readers' expectations. And if it's bad, it's already ruined the flow of your story. So if you have a prologue, consider why you have it. If it doesn't have an essential purpose, remove it. Or consider making it chapter 1 if it's really exciting and sets things up for the rest of the book. But don't just write a prologue to have a prologue. They're not necessary and ruin the flow. Number 2. Info dumping early in the story. As I already mentioned, prologues tend to be bad because most writers view them as the place to info dump. But info dumping is an issue even if you don't have a prologue. I've seen writers info dump in the early chapters as a way to introduce the world and its characters to readers. But this is not the way to go. When you toss a bunch of information at once at the reader, especially in the early chapters, you confuse and overwhelm them. They don't have room to digest the information. And that makes them feel like they're being force-fed the story. And that's a major flow killer. Chill out, go easy on the information, spread it out a little, let it flow like a stream, not a tidal wave. Number 3, having random filler scenes. Filler can be anything from small talk that doesn't need to be there to side characters having their own side stories, which also doesn't need to be there. Anytime you write something because you don't have a clue what should happen, stop and think, is what I'm writing of value? Or am I just writing random stuff to have something on paper? If it's random, then it's filler and you need to cut it out. Because you don't want random nonsense pulling your readers out of the story. And number 4, a stagnant midpoint where stakes aren't raised. This is another issue that oftentimes ruins the flow. Readers get to the middle of the story and nothing happens. The story stretches on, characters keep having the same adventures, and readers begin yawning. This is where the flow of the story essentially halts. But you want to keep things moving. So at the midpoint, make sure to raise the stakes so they keep the story going. You want characters in action and under even more pressure than before. If they were after something at the beginning of the story, then they are working even harder now to accomplish it. Remember, your job is to get readers from one point to another. And this keeps the story flowing without that midpoint drag. So that's all I have for you today. I'd love to know, are you or have you ever been guilty of any of these things? Let me know in the comments. If you're new to my channel, be sure to subscribe. I put out weekly writing advice videos that will take your story to the next level. Also, don't forget to follow me on social media to see what I'm up to from day to day and to chat with me. And before we go, I just want to give a quick shout out to Sarah Frayne, Alan J. Early, and Noah Kovanti from my shout out tier over on Patreon, as well as all my amazing patrons. Thank you all so much for your support. I really appreciate you. And remember, Nour for president.